Today we're going to be talking about Harry Potter Book 5, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This will be, of course, spoiler-filled, so if you haven't read it, don't hang out with me. I am, once again, sick while filming this, so I'm going to hope that my voice lasts, and I'm also wearing glasses so that you can't see how bloodshot my eyes are. But Harry Potter waits for no one, so let's get into it. Harry Potter in Book 5 gets a bad reputation. A lot of people like to call him angsty in this book, and I hate it. Don't get me wrong, I used to call him angsty. I used to not like this book and think that he was an angsty teen in this book, and that is a horrible, let's start a petition to stop calling this the angsty book. Because Harry is dealing with PTSD. He just watched a fellow classmate die before his eyes, be killed because of him. Harry was supposed to be the one that was transported, that was teleported, what are we saying? He was supposed to be the one that took the port key to face off against Voldy, and because Cedric went along with him, he was killed in an instant. It's not Harry's fault, but it certainly feels like it to Harry. So he watched his friend die, he's blaming himself for it, and immediately after this happens, he gets sent back to his abusive home. Not only sent back to an abusive home, but also ignored by the one person who he trusts more than anyone else, Dumbledore, as well as getting a bunch of really obscure letters from his best friends, essentially saying, hey, we're together and we'll see you soon, but we won't tell you when. Harry's put in the worst possible position to deal with his PTSD. He's ignored and left alone with abusive people and not able to work through his trauma at all. The other thing too is upon reread, I realized how non-angsty Harry is. In the beginning of the book, he does a lot of yelling. Hermione does a great job of politely letting him know that he's handling it poorly. At one point, she essentially says, no, that's not what I'm saying, and it'd be nice if you stopped biting my head off every time I tried to talk to you. They're patient with him, but they're also calling him out for this bad attitude that he's copping for legitimate reasons. So he has his issues at the beginning of the book when he first meets up with everybody and he's really mad about everything that's gone down. And then he starts getting really ragey at the end of the book too when he's destroying Dumbledore's office and yelling some more. But once again, just watched his godfather die. So his two biggest angst moments are immediately after death, and he's dealing with grief and no one's helping him process it well. The whole middle section of the book, he does okay. Yeah, he has a couple of outbursts here and there, but I feel like that's fair for a 15-year-old dealing with grief. For the most part, I actually really love the way Harry was portrayed in this book. So now that I have that out of the way, let's talk about the specific moments that go on throughout this book. I personally love all the scenes in Grimmauld Place. I don't know how the correct way to pronounce that. I call it Grimmauld. I find the mansion really interesting in and of itself, how dilapidated and how it's become kind of a breeding ground for different dark creatures that aren't that scary. Of course, then you have Sirius's mother as well, who's just a very interesting obstacle in and of herself. The mansion itself is really interesting, but what makes Grimmauld Place so interesting is the Order. The Order is probably the one group of people that I wish there were novellas about. I know people talk about wanting a little mini-series about the Marauders, but I want the Order. I'd love to see them in the beginning when it was the original Order, and I'd love to see them now. I love the dynamic of these people because it's primarily made up of people that we already know and love and trust, and then you have that weird dynamic of Moody, who we already know and love and trust, but also we don't know him at all because he was an imposter the entire time we fell for him. But I love the dynamic of this crew. I love seeing Lupin and Sirius together again. Molly basically claiming Harry as her own, saying that he's as good as her kid. We obviously don't get a lot of the Order because the kids aren't allowed to be involved in the meetings and stuff, but I kind of love that too because I loved being in Harry's perspective and seeing this crew of people that we truly admire and respect coming together and figuring things out, and us only seeing it from the outside. It almost makes me admire them more, but I also wish that there was a little novella or mini-series where we could see them together. I want to see the inner workings, and I want to see these little missions that they go on trying to protect the prophecy and all that jazz. Also in Grimmauld Place, we do see Molly's boggart. That's always been a painful scene for me, watching her cycle through her entire family, watching them be dead and sprawled out on the floor while she's sobbing over them. That's always been difficult, but man, as a parent, that was rough. Because, Molly, it's my boggart too. I think that scene really helps to kind of bring home how dangerous everything that we're going through really is, how much the Order truly is putting at risk, that Molly is so terrified that her family is at risk here. To me, at least, it really brings it home what everybody's sacrificing and how much risk and danger they're really in. This is obviously also an amazing book for the twins. I've always loved the twins. I feel like most of the fandom loves the twins. But man, this is such a good book for the twins. From when Harry is blowing his lid at the beginning of the book and the twins pop up and they say, "Harry, we thought we heard your Dorset tones," to them making these snack boxes and trying to figure them out and realizing, yeah, the vomiting's working, but we can't figure out how to stop it. Or, there's boils showing up in uncomfortable places as a side effect of certain things, and they're slowly figuring that out. And then actually trying to hide it all and do it all behind Hermione's back because she's afraid that they're afraid that Hermione's going to tell their mom. And then, of course, their great escape, their grand departure. We love the fireworks, which, I think the movie has it where they leave while the fireworks are going on, if I'm not mistaken. And that was how I remembered it, because this is a book that I haven't reread nearly as many as the others. So I loved the fireworks scene. I loved how they were hiding behind the tapestry and they were like, man, I hope she tries to make them disappear next, because when you try to vanish a firework, they just multiply by 100. And oh man, it's so good. And then they waited a while before they actually left. They finally figured out their swamp in I don't remember what was it, swamp in a box thing that they created. And no matter what they were creating, the teachers, well, specifically Umbridge, could not figure out how to get rid of them. Even Mr. Flitwick, who was able to get rid of the swamp super easily after Umbridge was gone, he said that it was a fine work of magic, and he even kept a little corner underneath a window and taped it off because he wanted to honor how great the magic was. And this really shows how smart Fred and George truly are. They always get bad marks in their OWLs and their NEWTs, but we know it's just because they don't try with their schoolwork. They're actually really talented with their magic and are such clever guys. And it makes me happy that Harry gave them that opportunity when he gave them the winnings in the last book for the Triwizard Tournament, that they were able to start something up, because truly they had so much potential and just not the funds to do it. And the fact that Harry gave them that opportunity and they were able to flourish and show what they're truly made of is so cool. So obviously Umbridge sends the Dementors to Harry, which I totally forgot that Umbridge was behind it. When that line came up at the end of the book, I was like, no! What? So Umbridge sends the Dementors after Harry, specifically wanting to get him expelled. And at first, when I read the letter that was sent to Harry and Fudge essentially told him, hey, you're expelled, you're going to have a trial, but first we have to destroy your wand because you broke this rule twice, and good luck with that. I was really shocked, and I wrote a bunch of notes in my margins because I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why would you do this? An underage student has performed magic in front of a muggle twice, and you're going to snap their wand over that? Like, how many times has magic been exposed to muggles in this series? Like, we have Moody, who has had to have muggles' memories erased multiple times, including in the beginning of book 4, or the fake Moody. We have, again, at the beginning of book 4, the guy who is in charge of the campsite. He had to have his memory modified a dozen different times, dozens upon dozens of different times, because the wizards kept exposing magic to him. So do we only snap underage wizards' wands when they are showing magic to muggles, but like adults can just have memories modified, no problem? It didn't make any sense, but I'm glad that Dumbledore swooped in and explained it to me, when basically he just said, yeah, you're not following the laws at all. You can't expel students, and you can't break their wands before their trial is even over. And you're not supposed to have a full trial for this. It was just Fudge being a butt again, just doing whatever he felt like, because he was the guy with the biggest power, and so he felt like he didn't have to follow any of the rules. The trial was intense. Dumbledore was amazing. He shows up and he's as always, smiling in the face of other people's nonsense, saying, good thing I was here 6 hours early, or however early it was, drawing himself at his own chair because one was not laid out for him because they didn't expect him to be there. And then the way he handled everything that Fudge threw at him when he was like, oh, I absolutely agree, which is why I think that you're going to be looking into how this happened, right? Then we get Umbridge as a teacher at Hogwarts, and woo, she is a teacher. She basically has this mentality that the purpose of schooling is not to teach you how to be able to do things, but to just get you through a test. Obviously, she's a terrible teacher, right? She doesn't actually teach anything. She just tells you, open up your books and read some chapters, which we're going to talk about how messed up schooling is in general in my next video, my next Harry Potter Book 5 video, because some things were made very clear in this book that, what are you even doing? But regardless, she's a terrible teacher. She doesn't actually teach them anything. In fact, she intentionally tries to keep them from learning anything. But then her idea about what the purpose of schooling is so, like, you don't want this to be practical. You don't want this to actually be something that they can take with them in life. You just want them to pass tests and then figure out life on their own. What? McGonagall's reaction to Umbridge is, oh man, this is a high book for McGonagall. This is a great book for McGonagall. She's regularly furious at her when Umbridge is sitting in on all the different teachers' classes, and she's doing her little interrupting classes just to find out if they got her note, regularly trying to force the teachers to do things her way, even though it doesn't make any sense at all. And McGonagall is so short and snappy with her, with no regard whatsoever about the consequences of what Umbridge is going to bring. She tells Harry to keep his head down, and then she just blatantly disregards Umbridge as much as she can. And then the DA forms, and that is, it's great to watch. I make it very clear on my channel that I am a huge supporter of Neville Longbottom. He is one of the best characters in the series. You can't change my mind. I think that he was done dirty with his arc, even though, man, he had a great arc. It should have been more. But this is the book where you really get to see him flourish. This is when he starts to, oh man, gains so much skill. He ends up being one of the best performers in the DA, only just under Hermione. He picks up the spells really quick. He buckles down and works so hard, and it's not because he's naturally talented, can figure all this out on his own. It's because he realizes that Bellatrix is free from Azkaban now, and she's the reason he's growing up without parents. And he is going to work his darndest to make sure that if he faces her, then he is going to put up a fight. And he thrives. This is also the book where Snape starts ignoring Harry and just pretending like he doesn't exist instead of actively trying to harm him. And Harry even mentions that he was able to concoct a more difficult potion, and potions is a class that he regularly does poorly in. He was able to concoct a rather difficult potion very easily when Snape just left him alone to do his own thing instead of constantly being in his ear and hounding him. And I think Neville is another example of that being true, because when he had a competent teacher, not someone who was trying to abuse and humiliate him, he was actually able to work hard, rise above, and perform well. Obviously, Snape hasn't been a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at this point, but just in general, I'm not a lover of Snape. Let's talk about Sirius, because he is a multi-leveled character. I think the fandom generally loves Sirius. I know that there are different thoughts out there and some people don't, but in general, he's a well-loved character amongst the fandom. I feel like I have a lot of love for him because we see things primarily through Harry's eyes in this series, and I want Harry to have in Sirius what Harry wants from Sirius, but he's also such a flawed character. He truly loves Harry with his whole entire being. He would do anything for Harry, and he does sacrifice so much for him. He's a true friend to James. He's a true friend to Harry. He's wonderful. Also, he sucks. He just is a very flawed character. You have the scene, oh my gosh, when Harry's at the fireplace and he's talking to him, and then Sirius says, hey, how about I be a dog again and come hang out with you in Hogsmeade? And Harry's response is, no, someone saw you the last time you did this. It's too risky. Don't do it. And then Sirius tells him, maybe you're not as much like James as I thought. He would have thought the risk was exciting. First of all, What a cruel thing to say to a kid who strives so hard to be like his dad that he wishes he knew. That is so cruel. Second of all, you're the adult here, Sirius. Why are you egging him on to take these risks as if you're the same age, you're both in school, and you're just trying to pressure each other into doing the more stupid thing? No, you're the adult. Don't try to egg him on to be an idiot when he's trying to be responsible. Sirius has several moments like this that really show how layered he is and how flawed he is. And I love me a flawed character, so I'm not disappointed that he is not perfect, but he certainly is not perfect. However, I do think that the good definitely outweighs the bad as he is now as an adult, even though he still has some bad. Speaking of Sirius, let's talk about the rough moment that we got with the memory when Harry's trying to learn occlumency. Going into his memory when we actually watch him being bullied and abused by James and Sirius, it's a rough go. Because obviously you want James and Sirius to be the heroes of the story. You want them to be strictly good guys. And they're not. They have very deep flaws. We are made to believe that James grew out of his bullying antics and that he became a better person and grew up and became better. And Sirius, ideally, we want to believe that he became better too, but we do see a lot of stuff that shows that he hasn't completely grown up either. He and Snape both have a lot of maturing to do. Sirius still calls Snape Snivelous when Snape is goading him and egging him on in this book as adults. Sirius is still trying to pull on that old thread of when he used to be a bully to try to intimidate Snape. And I hate it. I am glad that we get that scene because it does help us to sympathize with Snape and kind of see where he came from and what made him the way he is now. But I also feel like Snape being abused and then growing up to become an abuser isn't a good enough excuse. If you're an abuser, you still suck. But that also means that Sirius sucks too, which is what I was just talking about. As much as I love Sirius and there's so much good in him, he also sucks that he's still using those tactics and still bringing that stuff up around Snape. It's messed up. You're a grown adult. Grow up. Again, I love layered characters. I love characters that aren't strictly good or strictly bad. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Hermione because she gets a little bit more layers in this book too. Some darker layers. With the DA, she creates this spell where everybody that signs the contract is essentially signing that they won't tell anyone about the meeting. First of all, why did she have them sign the contract after the meeting? You should be signing that contract the second you walk in the door. You should be saying, yeah, whether I stick around or not, I'm not telling anyone immediately, not after they've heard Harry talk about it all. But second of all, she didn't tell them what they were signing. She just said, here's a paper, let's write it, let's just write our names and say that this is us saying that we're not going to tell anybody. But she doesn't tell them that this is actually a cursed paper, and if you do break your word, then you're gonna have the word sneak written across your face in like boils or acne. She didn't tell them what they were actually signing. Then when a few of them seemed a little bit hesitant to sign, they didn't really want to sign their names to things, they wanted to think about it a little bit, they wanted a minute to process, Hermione pressures them into signing so that they essentially don't have a choice. So she not only doesn't disclose what this contract is doing, but then she pressures them into signing it so that they don't really have a choice, which is not okay. Obviously, I understand why she took it so seriously. This is a really sensitive and scary situation, and you want everybody to be loyal, but also, yikes. The whole scene with Neville in the hospital wing was also, I think that's the hardest scene in the book. Of everything that happens in this book that's hard, that scene is the hardest. When we see his parents that are not fully there, and then his mom when she gives him the gum wrapper and how he tucks it in his pocket and, you know, he's collecting them, and that really hurts me bad. Again, I have a lot of love for Neville, but just seeing the pain of his family situation is hard. Okay, I'm gonna try to speed up a little bit because my voice is leaving me and I still have another video to film. It does bother me that whenever everything starts going down with Umbridge and with Sirius and the vision about him being tortured and Harry, you know. It bothers me that neither of them thought about Snape. When Harry says, there's no one left in the order that we can talk to with McGonagall gone. I can't think of anyone. And then Hermione responds with, this is why you were supposed to be learning occlumency, Harry. And it's like, you're literally talking about Snape right now, and neither of you can think of him, not even Hermione. It also bothers me that when Harry is in the fire with Sirius the first time they communicate, that Sirius isn't like, oh, by the way, that present I gave you that you've never opened, it was a two-way mirror. It would be a lot less risky than what we're doing now. You're literally in Umbridge's office. This could get you killed. This could ruin everything. Maybe let's talk about the mirror I gave you. No, he and Lupin are just chatting in the fireplace about James and their teenage lives, and Sirius never says, remember that mirror I gave you? He's just like, cool, let's chat this way, even though it's way more risky. Why didn't he bring it up? Why didn't he tell him? I get that Harry never unwrapped the gift, but like Sirius knows what he gave Harry. Why didn't he bring it up when they were in the fireplace together? I will say, because I was just ragging on Snape, because I do think that I have feelings about him. This is the first book where Snape really starts to look good. Not completely good, don't get me wrong, but he starts to look good in certain ways. When Harry finally does remember that Snape is in the order, he remembers it in a public place in front of Umbridge. So Snape obviously can't act like he's on Harry's side. So Harry gives him this coded message. Snape just kind of sneers at him and mocks him about it and then leaves. Obviously, that's what he has to do. He can't expose that he's in the order. But later we find out that immediately after that happened, Snape contacted Sirius to make sure he was okay, and that he watched out for Harry to leave the Forbidden Forest to make sure that he gets out okay. And when he does it, when he never comes back, he contacts the rest of the order to let them know what's happening, to let them know, I think he went to the Department of Mysteries, sends them after him so that they can rescue them, even says, Sirius, stay home, this is too dangerous, and then goes out into the Forbidden Forest to search for them just in case they're still there. This is the first time that we get to see that Snape is actually really invested in this mission. We see it a little bit in the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, because we see him actually actively fighting against Voldy, but at that point things are a little bit sticky still because Voldy isn't in power yet, and we don't really know a lot. I don't really count that too much. But this is the first time where it's clear that even with Voldemort in power, even with him being a double agent, he is invested in what the Order is doing, and he is fighting, actively fighting for the right side. Granted, he's a double agent, and Voldy believes that he's actively fighting for his side, so it could be a trick, but regardless, I like this vision. I like this look into what Snape is doing behind the scenes. Then we actually get into the Department of Mysteries, and that is a whole big mess. And honestly, it's not my favorite ending to a book, partially just because it's a mess. Like, it's just, there's so much chaos happening and none of it makes sense. And I know it's the Department of Mysteries, and so it's like stuff that they have there because it doesn't make sense. But why did you create the revolving door thing? Like, why did you make it so that when a door shuts, the wall spins really fast and you don't know which door you're supposed to? What was the point of that? I know that they're hiding things in the Department of Mysteries that are mysteries to them, but what's the point of the revolving wall that makes it impossible to actually get to where you're going? As far as the ministry, like, why'd you build it that way? But the chaos that ensues, it's funny, but it's just not really my favorite. So I don't really have a lot to say about it. I know a lot of goofy stuff happens, like with Ron and the braids, and I do love that everybody is taken out except for Harry and Neville, the two chosen ones, even though it's just Harry. But the two that the prophecy could have been about, like, ooh, it's them fighting side by side. It is unfortunate that Neville's nose is broken, so he can't even actually use the magic that he's trained so hard to be able to use. Like, he's finally competent with his wand and he can't even use it. Although we do get to see that Neville this whole time has been using his dad's wand. And we've already determined in this series that that is a less than ideal situation, and that magic will not work as well if you're using somebody else's wand, because the wand chooses the wizard. So we kind of have a look into maybe partially why Neville's not so great at magic is also because he's not using a wand that was supposed to be his. Sirius's death is obviously a rough go because you see them fighting together, and just the love that Sirius and Harry have for each other is so beautiful. and seeing Harry lose him is so hard. And then how Harry doesn't believe that he's gone. He's like, no, he's just on the other side of the veil. He's there. And so he's screaming for him. And that moment when Harry realizes Sirius has never left me waiting. If he could come back, he would have by now. And the fact that he isn't means he's gone. And so he has that realization once, but that's not good enough for our dear Rowling. No, we have to have that realization twice. When he decides that Sirius may come back as a ghost for him, and so he goes to Nicholas and he asks him about it. He's like, it doesn't matter that this is an unusual thing to do. It doesn't matter that a lot of people don't do it. Sirius would do this for me. And he genuinely believes that he's gonna see him. He looks through the door. He's like, he's gonna walk through this door right now as a ghost. He's coming back for me. And then, of course, we get one last punch to the gut when Harry realizes, I've had this mirror this whole time. This entire time, I could have communicated with him easily. I didn't need to run off to the Department of Mysteries. I didn't need to bring all my friends and potentially risk their death. I didn't need to do any of this stuff. I could have seen Sirius in the mirror this whole time, just piling on even more guilt on top of Harry. And then we get one last shred of hope. Sirius will be on the other side of this mirror. He'll see me. But of course, he doesn't. Honestly, I think it's just cruel. The amount of pain we go through with Sirius's death, the amount of pain that Harry goes through, and especially with that mirror, it's like, if he wasn't going to use it, and I know we use it in later books, but if he wasn't going to use it, don't give it to us. It's so cruel. We also probably need to talk about Dumbledore. We finally get a little bit closer insight into his plan, and we get to see what Dumbledore has been working up to all this time, his thoughts about, like, well, we get a little bit of information of Dumbledore's, of the prophecy and the fact that Harry was chosen by Voldy and what Dumbledore's been keeping from Harry all this time. And he still doesn't even tell him everything. And honestly, this has got to be the most frustrating thing about Dumbledore for me, is how much he keeps from Harry. Even when he finally cops up to the fact that he's been keeping stuff from Harry and it's been hurting him and not helping him, and it's been hurting a lot of people, and he needs to finally treat Harry like a competent human and tell him what he's thinking, he still doesn't really tell him very much. He tells him what he absolutely needs to know right now, but in the next two books, we still have a whole lot more learning to do. And Dumbledore it's so frustrating because I feel like so much could be handled so much better if Dumbledore would just communicate with Harry, and he doesn't. He holds information from Harry until the very last moment, over and over and over again. And I get that you made the mistake one time because you're trying to protect the kid, but man, once you cop up to it, actually do the thing right and start telling him stuff. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're finally going to end this review on the ending scene when members of the Order actually come to Platform 9 3/4 to meet up with the Dursleys and essentially say, hey, you've been treating Harry horribly up to this point. You're going to have to quit, or we're going to hurt you. I love that scene because once again, we get to see the Order and how well they work together, and we get to see their deep love for Harry. It's not just that they're protecting the chosen one. It's not just that, they're doing their mission, trying to keep him alive so that he can defeat Voldy because he's the only one that can do it and all that jazz. They actually genuinely love him, and I love to see it. I'm a mess, and I'm sorry if this was horrible to listen to. But I still have one more video to do today, so keep your eyes out. Tomorrow will be my Doesn't Make Sense video, so have fun with that. Book 5 is a beautiful book, and I appreciate it so much. It's still not one of my favorites, but it's certainly not at the bottom of the list anymore like it used to be for me. This book is so, it deals with so many emotions and so much love and friendship and devotion. And it also really, really shows the layers of characters. Characters like Sirius that you want to believe is all good. It shows that he's certainly not. And he has his bad layers too. Characters like Snape that it's easy to feel like he's all bad, which is kind of the camp that I've been in my entire life. You get to see the layers that really he's not quite there. I know there are a lot of Snape lovers in the world, and I'm not one, but maybe in this reread, my perspective will change a little bit. We'll have to see as I reread the next two books. But I do love how layered these characters are. I love that even though there is a lot of black and white, good and bad, strictly good, strictly evil characters in this world, I feel like this is where characters really start getting their different dimensions, and we start seeing that, no, it's not so black and white. There are characters that have a lot more to them than that, and There are characters that we have to forgive, and there are characters that we have to figure out if we're willing to forgive. Anyway, I really love this book. I'd love to continue chatting about it with you in the comments. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.